Now, for most of y'all around here, you call these things hills and mountains around here. They're not hills and mountains. For those of us that are from West Virginia, and I wish Madison could be here tonight. She'd back me up because she's seen them. That's what we call a hill, 900 feet up, because it's just the beginning of the mountains, where the mountains will go up to 2,000, 3,000 feet. And I know you guys don't have a lot of perspective of that, so let me see if I can put it into a little bit of perspective. How many know the Batman building, downtown Nashville? Any guesses on how tall that is?
3,000 feet.
No. Good try, though, but no. Way high. Give me another guess. Somebody, throw out a number. What'd you say? I heard a number mumbled somewhere. Somewhere. 1,000? Getting closer. Still got to come down.
900.
Still a little more. Good try. 600. Hey, 99. Do I hear L1? Like Price is Right running around down here. Come on down, Garnet. And Rod, what's the winner today? No, it's Bell South now. Batman building, what everybody calls it, is AT&T, whatever, used to be Bell South. It is 617 feet tall. So if you take that building, you cut it in half, then take that half and put it on top of the Bat Tower, then you get that bridge. It's like a 90-story building, okay? I remember when that bridge was finished, and I've been to several of those, because it's just something. You walk out, and I got to be a guy, I'll be honest, I've spit off that bridge just for the sake that I say I spit off a bridge from 900 feet up. I had to do it. But 900 feet, and these people come from all around the world because they want to jump off of it. Now, I have stood there, I have watched them jump off this bridge, I have thought, I can do that. No, not really. Then I walk up to the edge and look over. No, I'm not doing that. 90 stories straight down, and that's not even our highest mountain in West Virginia. I think the highest one in West Virginia is like 2,300 feet or something like that. So almost 4 times higher than that to go over it to get out of West Virginia. But they do that every year. They shut down that bridge. Absolutely gorgeous. I have been there many times, and we'll go back there many times. Little hesitant to take Landon because I got a feeling he'll be the one that wants to jump off the bridge with or without the chute. He's just going to want to jump because he thinks he's invincible. But it's a great thing to see, and it really is pretty. But it's scary. 900 feet up, straight down, and if you saw the river that runs down through there, maybe 6 feet deep. Okay, so it's not like it's going to stop you if you hit the ground. Forget it. You're a pancake. You're just done. You are just flat. So it can be a little scary to look over the edge. Anybody ever been to the Sears Tower? It's not Sears Tower. John Hancock or something. Somebody else bought it. Sears sold it. Chicago, tallest building. Oh well, 3rd tallest building now. Used to be the tallest building. I've been up in that thing too. And if you really want to get scared, they have windows in that building that kind of lean out over the edge. And you're like laying on the glass, and you can feel the building just doing one of these things. And you're like 100 stories up. It's like, no, I'm good. I'm going down. Get me out of here. It can be scary when you get up. Anybody afraid of heights? Okay, just be honest. Anybody afraid of heights? Okay, so 2 hands. He's not praising Jesus over here. He's admitting that he's scared of heights. I'm proud of you. It's not heights that get me. It's a sudden stop at the bottom that always scares me. But think about that, 900 feet. Be a little scary to jump off. Well, we're going to talk about something that is kind of close to my heart, something I really enjoy, but something that can be just as scary for a lot of you. And that's stepping out. Stepping out and being a leader. That can be, in my mind, and maybe in yours, a little more scary than jumping off of a 900-foot bridge, because then you got a parachute. So let me read you this list. Dan Reed, Candace Kelly, Stephen Henry, J.R. Krisky, Evan Burcham, Anna Foster, Emily Burcham, Benjamin Trammell, Kirby Krisky, Tiffany Stanford, Zachary Vaughn, Adam Vaughn, Christopher Williams, Levi Hall, Alex Zimmerman, Cameron Blevins, Megan Ledbetter, Aaron Walters, Hannah Walters, Noah Brock, Lynn Hampton, Haley Shaw, Judd Smith, Nick Muncie, Jamie Sampler, Caitlin Killian, Kelly Williamson, Seth Scruggs, Yulie Melton, Logan Pierce, Wes Pierce, Catherine Ross, Sarah Tackett, Brandon Kennedy, Austin Burns, Alex Burns, Levi Manjarnacina, Caleb Ledbetter, Ryan Shaw, Zach Shaw, Nikki DeMaio, and Wyatt Irwin. All those names, some of them you might have recognized. Some just moved off on to college. Some have been gone, have now become missionaries or youth pastors around the country, missionaries around the globe. But they all came through this youth group at one time or another. And I probably could have gotten a lot longer list. I mean, that was just a quick think in the past, say, I think about 10 years, give or take. But they were all leaders in this youth group. And trust me, they were not all the polished leaders that they are now when they were your age, because there's a few of them I wanted to strangle when they were your age. But they all came through here and they all had one thing in common. They were all willing to step out and be a leader. And they made a big difference. Some of them you had probably never met, but you know their name. So tonight we're going to talk about a legacy of leadership. So we're going to take a look at 1 Samuel chapter 17. So if you got your Bible or app or whatever you got to read it with, go ahead and open that up. Anybody know off the top of your head what's in this chapter? What story? I promise you it's a very familiar story. You have heard it since you were probably 3 years old. It involves a stone and a really big guy. David and Goliath. That's what we're going to look at tonight. We're going to look at David and Goliath, and we're not going to read the whole chapter because there's a lot there. But we are going to look at, and forgive me, I couldn't do the standard 3 things. I had to use 4 points. Sorry. And I broke it up in 2 and 2. But you guys have got your little note outline, and we're going to look at this familiar story. You know the story of David and Goliath. You have heard it over and over and over. But have you ever really stopped and looked at it and said, wow, David really put himself out there? And I would dare say that if you just know the Sunday school story of David and Goliath, you probably don't realize how much David put himself out there. So we're going to look, and we're going to pick up and flip over to, we're going to start in 31 there. But in verse 31 is kind of where it begins, and we're going to look tonight. But before this, you guys remember what's going on. Philistines have come down. They're fighting against Israel. Israel is pretty much over here on this side of the valley, cowering, scared, looking at, the Philistine army. Philistine army's over here on this side of the valley, making fun of the chickens over there. They won't come out and fight. They trot out this huge warrior named Goliath. And I even watched a couple National Geographic studies. They've even unearthed bodies from where the Philistines lived that were 9 feet tall. So probably like Goliath. I mean, we're talking, almost as tall as the basketball rim. So they found the bodies of these guys. So they were not, so here's Goliath coming out. He's over here taunting. Israel's over here just cowering. They don't know what's going on. And David's brothers have gone off, and they're over here fighting. And David's dad sends them to bring food to his brothers. And he runs up to his brothers, and he's like, what are you guys cowering for? What's going on? And they're like, dude, are you blind? Do you not see the 9-foot giant over there that's standing there ready to kill every last one of us? And, right before we pick up, David is like, what's the big deal about him? I'll take him out. Remember, we think David, we think King David, did all these great things, all that stuff. He was probably, give or take, somewhere around the age group of everyone in this room. We know that he wasn't young enough, or old enough, to go off to war, which means he was probably under the age of 20. We know that he had other brothers, because just right before this, he was just anointed the king of Israel. End of chapter 16, you can flip back and look at it. Samuel just poured oil on him and said, you're going to be the next king. Give or take, and this is not an exact science, probably 14, 15 years old, ballpark. And he looks out across the field like, I'll take that 9-foot dude out. No big deal. And he was a shepherd. And his own brother, and you can read it another time, but right there at the end of verse 28 and 29, we're not going to look at it, but his own brother says, dude, you just came down here because you just wanted to see the carnage. You just wanted to watch the battle. Don't talk all this trash. You're not going to go across that field and take care of this giant. You just came down here because you couldn't stand being left alone. And the word got around the Israel army. Remember, they're over here cowering. The word got around the army that there's a kid over here that says he's going to take out Goliath. Well, you better believe that got back to King Saul. And now King Saul already knew David. Right at the end of chapter 16, it says that Saul loved David. David played the harp for Saul. So he already knew who David was, already loved him. But then he hears, David's going to take it? Little David, he's going to... No. So then he calls him up to the office. And that's where we're going to pick up. Look at verse 31. Here's the first legacy of leadership. A leader has to remember what God has done. I think we got that on one of the slides. But let's look at verse 31. I'm going to read 31 through 37. It says, when the words which David had spoke were heard, which means David said, I'm going to go kill Goliath, they told them to Saul the king, and he sent for David. David said to Saul, this is David talking to King Saul, teenager talking to the king of Israel. Let no man's heart fail on account of him, referring to Goliath. Your servant will go and fight with this Philistine. And now, I'm kind of put a pin in it for a second. Notice he didn't say, I'm going to go kill Goliath. He just said, I'm going to go fight him. He didn't even know what was going to happen. He just knew somebody had to fight him. I'm going to go do it. We're going to come back to that. Then look what Saul says. Then Saul said to David, you are not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you are a youth, while he has been a warrior for his youth. Translation, you're a kid, he's a Navy SEAL. You lose, he wins. It's like Landon going to fight a Navy SEAL. Who do you think is going to win? The Navy SEAL. He's going to take out my 6-year-old son without thinking. That's what Saul just looked at him and said, dude, this guy's been a soldier his entire life. You've never fought in your first battle. How are you going to kill him? So even Saul the king, who loved David, now his brother has bashed on him like, dude, you just talking trash. Saul, who loved him, you can't do this. And David just packed up and went home, and the story ends, right? No, that's not what happened. So look at verse 33. So then Saul said to David, you are not able to go against this Philistine to fight him, for you are a youth, while he has been a warrior from his youth. But then David said to Saul in verse 34, your servant was tending his father's sheep when a lion or a bear came and took a lamb from the flock. I went out after him and attacked him and rescued it from its mouth. So the lion took the lamb, ran away to eat it. David went chasing after the lion. Not my smart move to make. I'll be like, hey, I got 100 of them. Take that one. I still got 99 over here. By the way, that's a typical view of Jesus Christ a little later. Catch that? He left the 99 to go get the one. So David said, the lion or bear came and took a lamb from the flock, and I went out after him and attacked him and rescued it from his mouth. And when he rose up against me, and when the lion rose up against him, I seized him by his beard and struck him and killed him. So when the lion got mad and reared at him, David just grabbed him by the mane and killed him. Like it was no big deal. I mean, it's only a lion. Only 3-inch teeth that could bite straight through you without thinking about it twice. In verse 36, he says, your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. So this has happened more than once. Kind of started wondering about David's shepherding ability. You keep letting the lions and the bears come in, and he had to go get them. But when they got him, buddy, he went after them. He took out the lion, he took out the bear. And this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, since he has taunted the armies of the living God. And David said, the Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. And Saul said to David, go and may the Lord be with you. The first thing about leadership, you got to remember what God's already done. David already had faced a lion. Now, I would dare say that most of us in this room have never fought a lion or a bear, because we probably would not be here, and we'd be in a cemetery somewhere. But David knew he had already faced down this lion and bear, and that was scary enough. And he came back without a scratch, but the lion and bear is dead. He knew that was already taken care of. He remembered, God's already done this for me. He probably remembered, and this is Shawn interjecting, because if you look back at chapter 16, like I said, Samuel had already said, you're going to be the next king. The prophet Samuel had already anointed him, so David had to have in the back of his head, dude, I'm going to be the next king. Ain't nothing getting between me and what God said. He was confident because God had already done so much for him. Do any of you here think you are here by sheer happenstance? Circumstance, coincidence. Sorry, happenstance, I don't know West Virginia word. It's accidental that you're here. You just so happen to be not just here tonight, but in this church. Do you think it's coincidence, good or bad? And guys, I get it. I know not everybody has a perfect life. I get that. I know that. Trust me, I work in foster care. I see that. I've seen it for 20 years. I know that. God has a plan for you no matter what, good or bad, for who your parents are. He didn't just happen to, oh, wait, I forgot about him. I've got the plan for Shawn. I completely forgot about him. I need to come up with a plan for his life. No. Paul and then even Jeremiah on back said, when you were in the womb, I knew you. There are no coincidences with God. He has done miraculous things for you, probably many things that you don't even realize. You think about it. And I'm going to stay away from Garnet because he might kill me. Many of you know that I had a heart attack on one Wednesday night here and walked out and opened the door for Garnet to come in as I drove myself to the hospital, and he's wanting to get after me ever since. I should be dead. Many of you probably don't even realize how many times you crossed a street and an angel said, nope, it's not their time. This accident's going to happen 30 seconds after they walk across the street. God has done so much for you, and I know it's hard at your young age to remember all the great things that you have, but I mean, let's make it really easy. We're in America, the land of the free. We are here without fear of somebody stomping in here and arresting us. We didn't have to worry about picking up a Bible and being arrested. If we run out of food, we can go to Walmart or Taco Bell, whatever's closest. We are privileged where we are. But God had a plan for each one of you. whether you realize it or not, and you're going to grow old, you're going to get old like Darren, and I mean me, and you're going to look back one day, and you're going to realize, she's laughing at it, she got it, you're going to be realizing how much God has done for you every step of the way. It's little things. Parents that took care of you, friends that you could lean on, schools to go to, a roof over your head. A leader has to remember, God has already done so much for me. Why am I afraid of what's in front of me when all this has been done for me by a great God? Because look at what Saul said to Paul. Now, that'd be a time jump. What Saul said to David, right there at the end, and I read it kind of quick. Go and may the Lord be with you. Translation, vaya con Dios, bro. Good luck. You're going to need it. Saul was not even confident that his friend David could go out and do what he said, even though he knew David was going to be the next king. Even though David had all done this, but David did. He remembered what God had done. That's the first thing a leader must do. The second thing, a leader has to remember what God has made. Now let's go back in here in the passage. And Saul, he does what most of us would do. Let's read 38. You get that? Yeah, 38 to 40. Then Saul clothed David with his garments and put a bronze helmet on his head and clothed him with armor. David girded his sword, which means he put it on, over his armor and tried to walk, for he had not tested them, which means he couldn't really walk. It was so big and heavy on him. So David said to Saul, I cannot go with these, for I have not tested them. And David took them off. He took his stick, which was probably like his shepherd's rod. A stick. Yeah, you're going to go fight a 9-foot dude. Get a stick. He took his stick in his hand and chose for himself 5 smooth stones from the brook and put them in the shepherd's bag, which he had, even in his pouch, and his sling was in his hand, and he approached the Philistine. Saul, he loved David. He knew he was going into battle, so he wanted to do the best for him. Do you know that if you go back in chapter 16, David was even Saul's armor bearer? David was the one that was responsible for carrying Saul's armor into battle, so that when the king said, bring me my sword, David runs over with his sword. Bring me my armor, here comes David with his armor. That's what David's job was, so he knew this armor. But when he put it on, he couldn't walk. Now, if you ever listen to this bronze or any kind of metal, you know it's heavy. You put a helmet on there, come on. It's going to be, David was probably 15 or 16 years old, give or take. Here's big man, Saul, probably about 6 foot, give or take, putting his armor on a kid. It's kind of like LeBron James coming in here, taking his jersey off and putting it on, like Walker. Oh, okay, we'll go Grace. It would kind of swallow them whole, right? They couldn't, really play basketball if they're wearing that, right? It would not fit right. Walker's like, who's LeBron James? Okay. You just imagine that. Imagine trying to play football. You're Landon. Let's use my son Landon. I think he stood up and he said, I want to see how tall I am to you, Daddy. And he puts his head like right here. I'm like, dude, you're 6. You're not supposed to be right there already. But he's right here. Now imagine, I'm playing football. I've got pads on for a man my size, and I put him on Landon. How effective would he be? Would he be able to walk? No, he'd be probably crumpled up under the weight of the helmet and the pads and everything else. He couldn't handle it. That's what David was going. And he looked and he said, hey, this ain't me. Because remember, what was the first point? A leader has to remember what God has done. Did David have a sword or armor when he went chasing after that lion and that bear? No. He had a stick and some stones. So when it came time, he remembered. God made David to do this, not Saul, not somebody else. One of my heroes in the faith, and many of you know him, is Roger Glidewell, among many others, including Pastor Darren and Pastor Steve. See, I got to get it in there. And Pastor Rick. Spent many an hours with those men. But Roger, I mean, you guys know Roger. If you've been to Global, you've seen Roger. He is a charismatic preacher. I'm not going to do the chest thump because I might hurt myself. I don't know how he does that. Cannot do that. I would hurt myself if I did that. But he is if you guys know what I'm talking about. I mean, I've watched Roger speak, and it's like you can see God just whispering in his ear when he stops and then goes the direction, and he picks out that student, just that one student that needed to be touched. He knew who that was. But you know what the funny thing is? God didn't call me to be Roger Glidewell. God called me to be Shawn. He made me to be Shawn. And yes, he even made me to be bald. That's okay. Because he made me for a reason. I don't need to be Roger Glidewell to do what God told me. I don't need to be anybody else but the person that God made. That's it. That's all I have to be. If I try to be somebody else, if I try to be Roger, if I just try to stand up here and preach like Roger, I promise you I will fail. Because I'm not Roger. I can only stand up here like Shawn would. I can only live like Shawn would. You can only live like you were, because God made you. A leader has to remember who God made. He did not make you to be like somebody else. He made you to be you, who you are. That's it, and that's what David did. So he went out to face Goliath. So those first 2 points, a leader has to remember what God has done, and a leader has to remember what God has made. Those are kind of before the battle, before the action. Now we're getting into the action. And it's not going to be on, I don't think we've got it on the screen, but you guys have heard this rant of what Goliath says. In verse 41, then the Philistine came on and approached David with the shield bearer in front of him. When the Philistine looked and saw David, he disdained him, which means he laughed at him, for he was but a youth, and ruddy, which means he was probably somewhere in the 13 to 15 ballpark, give or take, with the handsome appearance. So he was like pretty boy. So, Philistines, he's shouting out over at him. The Philistine said to David, "Am I a dog that you come to me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods, the Philistines' gods. Then the Philistine also said to David, "Come to me, and I will give you your flesh to the birds of the sky and the beasts of the field," which means I'm going to tear you up and leave you for the dogs. Then David said, "You come to me with a sword, a spear, and a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have taunted. This day the Lord will deliver you up into my hands, and I will strike you down and remove your head from you, and I will give the dead bodies of the army of the Philistines this day to the birds of the sky and the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know there is a God in Israel, and that all his assembly may know that the Lord does not deliver by sword or by spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands." Now it's time to put up or shut up. There is nobody on that field but David, because the rest of the army, Israelite army, is over here cowering. Philistines are over here laughing their heads off that a 13-year-old rugrat is going to come out here and face a 9-foot giant. But David's gone from, I'm going to go out here, remember what he told Saul? I'm going to go out here and fight him. I'm just going to go do it. Now he's saying, I'm going to cut your head off. He couldn't even reach Goliath's head if he stood next to him. If he had a ladder, he probably couldn't have reached Goliath's head if he stood next to him. But he looks at him and says, I'm going to cut your head off, and I'm going to feed your body to the birds and the dogs and every one of your buddies out there too. So now's the time of the action. And that's where our next two are going to come into. A leader, you've got to remember what God has done and what God has made. The next point, what you've got up there? Point number 3. A leader will act with courage. Verses 48 to 51. Now, if you have your own Bible, don't write in someone else's Bible, but I want you to notice something. How many of you have seen a picture of David and Goliath? You went to Sunday school, you probably saw one. David was just standing here. Goliath's over here. He's laughing at him. And they're standing still, right? Then Goliath starts to walk over here, and David's like, I got to get my stones, and throw them at him. That's not what happened. Look at what it says in verse 48. Then it happened when the Philistine rose up, so Goliath got up and drew near to meet David, that David cowered in fear. No. David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet the Philistine. He saw Goliath. He took off sprinting at him. Oh, I'm going to give me a piece of this guy. This guy's got to go down. He did not hesitate. The moment came when he remembered what God had done, what God had made. Now something's standing in front of him that's coming at God, and he did not hesitate to act. He went running at it. He did not show the slightest hint of fear. And while he's running, and David put his hand into his bag while he's running and took from it a stone and slung it and struck the Philistine on his forehead, right here, right between the eyes. And the stone sank into his forehead so that he fell to his face on the ground. Okay. So David is still running across the battlefield. Now the big 9-foot Goliath lying in front of him. Now he can reach his head because he's lying on the ground. So what does David do? Thus David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone, and he struck the Philistine and killed him. But there was no sword in David's hand. Then David ran. See, he's still running over there. Then David ran and stood over the Philistine and took his sword, Goliath's sword, and drew it out of his sheath. Probably had to drag it out of his sheath because, he's a 9-foot dude. His sword's probably as tall as David. Just proportionately. Took it out of his sheath and killed him and cut off his head with it. 13-year-old boy just showed a little bit of courage, and now a 9-foot giant's laying dead, headless. Wow. Look at what God just did. Because one boy came up on a battle. What's this guy over here talking trash? Why are you guys cowering like a bunch of kids? Go get him. All right, I'll go do it. He remembered what God had done, who God had made, and then he showed courage. And the giant fell. The impossible, unbeatable, undefiable Goliath is dead. The thing that could not happen just happened. Because David was just that great of a shot. No. Because God put David in that moment and prepared him for that moment to bring glory to God through David's courage. And the best definition I've ever heard of courage is not the absence of fear. It's the willingness to do something even when you are scared. Courage does not mean you're not scared. It just means you are willing to do something about it even though you're scared. And the final thing for a leader, the fourth one, I said I would have 4. As a leader will encourage others by their example. Look at what happens right after David. It just all, stone, Goliath, head. Whoa. So everybody's watching this because both armies are sitting up on the hillside, looking down in the valley, watching 13-year-old kid take on 9-foot Goliath. Now there's only a 13-year-old kid standing. A leader will inspire with their example. Look what happened. When the Philistines saw their champion was dead, they fled. They took out running. And then in verse 52, the men of Israel and Judah arose and shouted and pursued the Philistines as far as the valley and to the gates of Ekron, that slain the Philistines lay along the way to Sharim, even to Gath and Ekron. The sons of Israel returned from chasing the Philistines and plundered their camps. One boy stood up, and now the ones that were the chickens and cowering in fear over here are the ones that are screaming and chasing after the ones who are running, who were originally fearless. Because the leader, David, stood up and became a leader, and the entire Philistine army was destroyed. Kind of like a match. One little match, little twig. But it has the power to burn down a forest. There's hundreds of men and women fighting in California right now to stop forest fires from going that were probably started with one little match. That's what a leader can do. It just takes one. Remember what God has done for you. Remember, He made you, and He made you how you are. A leader will step out. Now, I don't remember when it was a few weeks ago, when last time I was here, I used the song Fear is a Liar. Darren, Garnett, and I have talked, and others have talked several times about how in this room is full of leaders. I read you at the beginning a legacy that you've been left. Now it's time to add your name to that list. And I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, I'm completely confident that there is at least one, and I'm more sure that there are more than one, that are right now hearing in their, in that little voice inside your head, you know how God speaks to you. If you're one of His, you know exactly how He speaks to you. He's telling you whatever that may be. You're the leader I need. This is what I've called you to do. And you're going to have people that say, you're just a teenager. Well, you know what? God's already done great things in my life, and He made me who I am. Now it's time for me to have courage and lead by example. And I guarantee you, because like I said with that song from the last time, Fear is a Liar, if you're hearing that voice, and I do believe that some of you are, there's also another little voice that's whispering in your ear, dude, that's scary. Don't do that. You might get hurt. You might get embarrassed. That's not God. That's the enemy telling you, no, stay in your seat. Stay comfortable. Don't step out for God, because He doesn't want you to step out for God. But it's time for some of you that are now moving up into this youth group and becoming young men and young women to take your place in leadership. Not wait for 30 years when you're 40 years old, or you're married, or you're out of college. God made you for this moment right now, right here. What's He telling you that you need to do? And will you have the courage to step out, even though it's scary, even though it's fearful? Will you have the courage that David had and be a leader and continue that legacy of leadership? Let me pray for you.